Where is the agreement? Sign it now and get out of this house!
The cold voice cut through the dinner table like a blade, slicing everything apart as the pen was shoved hard toward her. She flinched, her hand instinctively clutching her stomach, her eyes darting around in panic.
Mom, what are you talking about?
No one answered. Only heavy, icy stares pressed down on her as her mother-in-law curled her lips into a smirk, her voice dripping with contempt.
Do you not understand? Sign the divorce papers. You are not worthy of my son.
She shook her head repeatedly, tears beginning to spill.
I didn't do anything wrong. I'm still trying.
A scoff came from her sister-in-law.
Trying? Trying what? You think your tiny paycheck every month does anything for this household?
She froze, her throat tightening, unable to respond as her mother-in-law continued, her tone growing sharper.
This house does not lack money. What we need is a daughter-in-law who is worthy, not someone who thinks a pregnancy gives her value.
She clenched her hands, her voice trembling.
But the baby is his child.
Her mother-in-law cut her off instantly, without hesitation.
What does that baby have to do with you? After you give birth, do you think you still have the right to stay here?
The air seemed to freeze as she turned to her husband, her eyes pleading for help.
Please, say something. You know I'm not who they say I am.
He kept his head down, silent for a few seconds, then spoke softly, exhaustion in his voice.
Maybe we should stop.
The words were light, but they struck her directly as she froze.
What? What do you mean?
He didn't look at her, only repeated,
Stop. It will be better for both of us.
She broke down, her voice cracking.
Better for who? Did you even think about the child?
No one answered as her sister-in-law crossed her arms and shrugged.
The child can be raised, but not you.
That single sentence completely choked her as her mother-in-law pushed the papers closer.
The divorce papers are already prepared. Sign it. Don't drag this out any longer.
She looked down at the paper, her hands trembling so badly she couldn't even hold the pen.
Please, give me more time. I will try.
But immediately the cold voice cut in.
Trying? How many years has it been? And you're still the same.
She shook her head, tears falling onto the table.
I don't want a divorce. I don't want my child to be born without both parents.
Her mother-in-law laughed, her eyes full of disdain.
Don't use that baby to gain sympathy. This family does not need people like you.
She turned to her husband one last time, her voice weak.
Do you really want this?
He stayed silent, then gave a slight nod, barely noticeable, but enough to shatter everything completely, as her hand fell limp, the pen slipping from her fingers and hitting the table with a dry clack. The room falling into silence again, but this time the silence was no longer the same. It was heavy, final, with no way back, and no one in that room realized that the person they were forcing out, the one they despised and trampled on, had never been as weak as they thought. And the price of every word spoken just now would not end with a single sheet of divorce papers. She entered this marriage with nothing but trust, no money, no background, nothing that commanded respect. In her husband's family's eyes, she was just ordinary, which really meant unworthy. She believed that as long as she lived kindly, they would eventually accept her. But she was wrong. Because in some places, people do not judge how you live, they judge where you come from. In her early days as a daughter-in-law, she already felt the coldness, yet she kept telling herself it only needed time, until the words became clearer.
This house does not lack people who want to step in, but not everyone is worthy enough to stay.
She remained silent, not because she didn't understand, but because she chose to endure. Yet, the more she endured, the more they believed she had no value to resist. The words that followed grew heavier.
You're lucky you even got to marry my son. Other than that belly, what else do you have?
No shouting was needed, but it was enough to cut deep. She only lowered her head, swallowing everything, not because she was weak, but because she still had hope. Yet, that hope was worn down day by day. And in this house, everything was not just words, but control. A place where she was constantly reminded that she was standing in the wrong position.
Other people as daughters-in-law, even when pregnant, they still keep everything in order. Not like you. Don't think that being pregnant gives you any privilege. In this house, everyone must know their place.
Those words, repeated over and over until she could no longer tell what was right or wrong, she began to doubt herself, to wonder if she really was as useless as they said. Her husband, the person she once trusted the most, at first still stood by her side. When his mother said something too harsh, he would gently say,
"Mom, that's enough. Don't take it to heart. She doesn't really mean it."
"Don't mind it. My mom just says things like that." Those words once were the only thing keeping her going, but then they disappeared. Not all at once, but little by little. When his mother said, "She married into this family but brings no benefit, only adds burden," he no longer spoke up. When his sister scoffed, "All my friends marry into wealthy families and look at ours. Clearly the wrong choice." He stayed silent, and when she turned to him, hoping he would say something, he avoided her gaze. That silence hurt more than any insult. She began to realize that he was no longer standing beside her, but merely trying to stand in the middle, and in the end, chose the safe side, his family. Their conversations grew fewer and fewer, and when they did talk, it was only short, shallow exchanges.
Are you okay?
Yeah,
How was your day?
normal.
No more sharing, no more listening, no more protection, only distance remained. She still tried, still did everything as before, still woke up early, cooked, cleaned, went to work, then came home to continue endless chores. Even as her belly grew bigger, her body more exhausted, she never dared to complain. But the more she tried, the colder they became. One day, she overheard a conversation behind a closed door. Her mother-in-law's voice was clear and firm. "After she gives birth, let her take care of the baby. Then we can arrange to separate them. This house cannot keep someone like her for long." Another voice replied, probably her sister-in-law, "That's right. Keeping the grandchild is enough. As for her..." The sentence didn't need to be finished, but she understood. She stood there, not daring to step in, not daring to make a sound, just standing still like an outsider, listening as her own life was decided by others. And at that moment, she realized something. In this house, she had never truly been part of the family. She was only a temporary choice, until they found someone better, more worthy, someone who matched the standards they always talked about. But what they didn't know was that her silence had never been weakness, and what they were about to face would no longer be what they expected. She began to realize that something was wrong, not from a major incident, but from the smallest, most ordinary things repeated every day like dull knives. At first, it was just coming home a little late from work. The moment she stepped into the house, not even having time to change, her mother-in-law's voice echoed from the living room, not loud, but enough for everyone to hear. "What kind of job keeps you out this late?"
This house is not a hotel. You come and go whenever you want now?
She quickly apologized, put down her bag, and rushed into the kitchen, even though her whole body was exhausted, her pregnant belly heavy, making every step slower. But that slowness became an excuse to be scrutinized and mocked. While she was struggling to wash vegetables, her sister-in-law leaned against the doorway, looked her up and down, then sneered. "If you're like this while pregnant, you probably won't be able to raise a child properly either." She didn't react, only lowered her head and kept working. But every single word lingered in her mind, refusing to disappear. Small tasks gradually became imposed routines. She was the first to wake up, the first to enter the kitchen, the last to clean up. There were days when the whole family had already finished eating, and she was still standing in the kitchen, not even having the chance to sit down before her mother-in-law spoke bluntly. "You eat later. Finish cleaning first. The family isn't done yet. Don't think about your portion so soon." That sentence might sound normal at first, but repeated enough times, it was no longer about household duties. It was a way to define her place. She gradually stopped sitting at the same table, not because she was explicitly forbidden, but because every time she tried to sit, there was always a look or a comment that made her stand up again. One time, as she pulled out a chair, her mother-in-law put down her chopsticks, looked straight at her, and said,
You can sit and eat with us.
"But at the very least, you should know where you stand in this house." She froze, her hand still holding the chair, then quietly pushed it back and returned to the kitchen. No one said anything more, but everyone understood. The words, "not worthy," began to appear more frequently, no longer hidden, no longer implied. "What exactly makes you think you are worthy of my son?" Or, "Look at yourself. Aside from that belly, what do you have to keep? Him?" Those words were not just insults. They were a way to assert that she had no value, no rights, no place in this family. And the most painful part was that her husband stood right there, heard everything, yet said nothing. At first, she still turned to look at him, hoping for a glance, a word, even the smallest sign that she was not alone. But gradually, she stopped looking because she knew there would be nothing. He began to change in a way that was obvious yet silent. He no longer came home early, no longer asked if she had eaten, no longer noticed when she was tired. When she said, "I don't feel okay," he would casually reply, "You're overthinking it." When she said, "Your mom doesn't like me," he would only sigh, "That's just how my mom is. Try to endure it a little." Endure became the answer to everything. But no one ever said how long she was supposed to endure. Their conversations grew shorter and shorter, and every time they spoke, it ended in silence. She began to realize that he was no longer standing beside her, but only trying to keep everything peaceful, even if that meant she had to suffer. One evening, while she was cleaning in the kitchen, she heard voices from the living room, the door slightly open, and her mother-in-law's voice rang out clearer than ever. "My son could easily marry someone better. There are plenty of women with money and proper families, not someone like her." Another voice responded, probably her sister-in-law, with a light laugh. "I said it already. Why keep her here and crowd the house? We can deal with it after she gives birth. It's not too late." She froze, still holding the cloth in her hand, not daring to step out, not daring to make any sound. Every word hammered into her mind, clear, cold, leaving no room for misunderstanding. She was no longer a daughter-in-law in this house, but just someone waiting to be replaced. That night, she didn't sleep. Lying with her back to her husband, she said nothing, but tears kept falling silently. The baby in her belly moved slightly, like a reminder that she was not alone. But that only made it hurt more, because she realized that even the child was not enough to secure her place in this house. And what frightened her the most was not the words they said, but the fact that none of those words were ever denied by anyone. Everything continued to escalate in a way that didn't need noise. There were no major arguments, no direct confrontations, but the pressure grew heavier, like a tightening grip she could not escape. The things she did were no longer seen as responsibilities, but as obligations, and any mistake was magnified. One time, she forgot to wash her mother-in-law's clothes separately, and immediately, the familiar sharp voice rang out. "Everything you do needs to be reminded, and you still call yourself a daughter-in-law." She quickly apologized, but apologies were never enough. If apologies could fix things, anyone could apologize. The problem is, you don't know your place. That word again. place. A simple word, yet it became something she was constantly reminded of, as if she was standing in the wrong spot, living the wrong role, existing the wrong way. Her sister-in-law never missed a chance to push things further. Every time guests came over, she would hear half-joking, half-mocking remarks. "My sister-in-law is very obedient. She does whatever she's told. She'd probably be more suitable as a maid than a daughter-in-law." Laughter followed, not loud, but enough for her to know she had become the joke. She didn't react, didn't argue, just kept working as if she heard nothing. But inside, everything had begun to change. Her endurance was no longer a choice, but a forced state. Her husband chose silence. No concern, no protection, as if saying nothing would make everything pass, but that only made things worse. One time she asked, Don't you think they're
that's
going
too
too
much?"
far? He only replied, I just
want things to
be
stay peaceful.
peaceful. She looked at him. Peaceful for who? He said nothing, and she understood. She had lost him. That dinner went on like any other day, but the atmosphere was suffocatingly heavy. All eyes were on her. Her mother-in-law slammed a stack of papers onto the table. No explanation, no hesitation, just one sentence. Sign it. You are not worthy of my son. She froze, eyes wide, as if she couldn't believe what she had just heard. Her hand tightened against the edge of the table, then unconsciously moved to her belly, her voice trembling.
Mom, I'm pregnant.
Please. Tears began to fall, not loud sobs, but silent, continuous drops, choking her words until every sentence broke apart. She looked around the table, hoping someone would speak, but everyone remained silent, a collective silence, as if they had already agreed beforehand. Her sister-in-law smirked slightly, her eyes filled with half amusement, half contempt, then said slowly,
Only you haven't understood.
You're the only one who refuses to. The sentence was light, but enough to make her feel completely excluded, like someone who had no right to be part of her own story. She turned to her husband, eyes pleading, her voice shaking. You, say something. You know I'm not who they say I am. But he kept his head down, eyes fixed. On the table, hands clenched together, not looking at her, not saying anything, as if everything happening had nothing to do with him, as if the woman sitting across from him was not someone he had once chosen, once promised to protect. That silence was not just a refusal to speak, it was a complete withdrawal. Her mother-in-law pushed the papers toward her again, this time harder, her voice pressing down each word. Stop wasting everyone's time. Sign it, then pack your things and leave. She shook her head repeatedly, tears falling onto the paper, blurring the pre-printed lines, her voice choking.
I don't want a divorce. I don't want my child to grow up without both parents.
But those words did not move anyone. Instead, they made the atmosphere even colder. Another voice came from her sister-in-law, soft but cruel.
Anyone can raise the child. You are not needed.
That sentence struck her like a blade through the heart, leaving her frozen, unable to say another word. Outside, from the window, the voices of neighbors drifted in, not loud, but clear enough for every word to slip into her ears like a judgment from the outside. That family married a daughter-in-law who doesn't match their status. Now they're seeing the consequences. Another voice added. I heard they're getting divorced soon. Makes sense. Who could accept someone like that? She closed her eyes, tears spilling even more, not only because of what was happening in this room, but because she knew that even if she stepped outside, she wouldn't escape those looks. Her mother-in-law tapped her hand lightly on the table, pulling her back to reality, her voice not loud, but full of pressure. Did you hear me? Sign it. The pen was pushed closer, so close that she only needed to reach out to touch it. She trembled as she picked it up, the tip touching the paper, but her hand could not move. Her heart pounded, her mind went blank. She looked at her name on the document, then at his name, then at the man sitting in front of her who didn't dare look at her. Everything seemed to collapse right before her eyes. She bit her lip hard, trying to hold back the sob breaking out, her hand gripping the pen until it turned pale. Then she lifted her head, looking at each person one last time, no longer with pleading eyes, but with the gaze of someone who had just realized the truth, that everything she had tried to protect had never belonged to her. The pen tip still touched the paper, but she did not write, did not sign. That moment stretched in heavy silence, so dense that no one dared to speak. And in that silence, for the first time, she no longer felt weak, because if she signed it, she would not only lose a marriage, but also erase her own worth with her own hands. And what no one in that room realized was that from the moment she stopped, everything had already begun to change in a way they could not control. The pen tip still rested on the paper, but did not move. Her hand trembled once, and then stilled, as if an invisible force pulled her back right before everything became irreversible. A few seconds passed in suffocating silence, all eyes still fixed on her, waiting, pressing. But this time, she did not lower her head anymore. She took a deep breath, slowly placed the pen down on the table, the small clack sound echoing clearly in the tense space. And for the first time since stepping into this house, she deliberately raised her head and looked straight at each person, her eyes no longer trembling, no longer avoiding, but carrying a strange calmness that made even those sitting across from her pause for a brief moment. Her mother-in-law frowned, her irritated voice breaking the silence.
Why are you still hesitating? Sign it.
But she did not respond immediately. She looked at her, then turned to the husband sitting across from her, finally speaking, her voice not loud but clear, each word steady, no longer breaking apart like before. Before I sign, I think I should make one thing clear. That sentence changed the atmosphere instantly. It was no longer an imposed silence, but a tense, suspicious anticipation. Her sister-in-law curled her lips, her voice mocking. What now? Are you going to explain or beg? But she paid no attention. Her gaze remained calm, steady, without avoidance or reaction, as if those words no longer held any power over her. She continued, slowly but firmly. All this time, everyone here thinks I have nothing, right? No one answered, but this silence was no longer agreement. It was waiting to see what she would say next. Her mother-in-law crossed her arms, her voice cold. If you have nothing, then that's why you're being treated this way. If you have something, say it clearly. She nodded slightly, as if she had been preparing for this moment for a long time, then reached into her bag, took out her phone, opened a message thread, placed it on the table, turning the screen toward them, her voice even, neither fast nor slow.
I never talked about my family, not because there was nothing, but because it wasn't necessary.
Her mother-in-law's expression began to shift, no longer entirely filled with disdain, though still firm.
What does your family have to do with this?
She did not answer directly, instead opening another file, this time a document scan, clear, stamped, with names and figures. She placed it on the table and gently pushed it forward. This is the investment contract for this house. My share. That sentence seemed to suffocate the room for a moment. Her sister-in-law frowned immediately.
What? Did you just say?
Her mother-in-law picked up the paper, her eyes scanning quickly through each line before stopping at the signature, her expression changing noticeably. No longer able to maintain her earlier composure, she continued, not raising her voice, not trying to dominate, simply stating the truth. This house does not entirely belong to your family. Part of the purchase came from me. No one spoke, no one argued immediately, because what lay in front of them was not words, but documents, numbers, undeniable proof. Her husband finally lifted his head for the first time since the beginning of the meal. His eyes filled with shock, as if he were looking at a completely different person, his voice barely escaping.
Why didn't you ever tell me?
She looked at him, without blame, without anger, only answering with a short sentence that carried weight.
Because I thought you didn't need to know. To love me.
Leaving him unable to react, while her mother-in-law slammed the paper down on the table, her voice no longer as firm as before.
So what if you have a little money?
But this time, the words no longer carried the same weight. She looked straight at her, her gaze unwavering.
I don't use money to prove my worth. But if everyone here chooses to use it, then I have to make it clear.
Then she continued, slowly, as if peeling away layers of misunderstanding.
She continues. My family doesn't show off. But we have a company.
Their own assets, their own standing, things I never needed to bring up. A silence followed, this time not because of pressure from them, but because what she had just said went far beyond what they had imagined. She picked up her phone, made a call, and after only a few seconds, spoke briefly.
Dad, I'm at my husband's house. I think I should say this.
No long explanations were needed, no elaborate justifications, just a call, a form of address, a calm voice, was enough to completely change how the people sitting in front of her saw her. Her mother-in-law no longer spoke immediately. Her sister-in-law no longer smiled. Her husband sat in complete silence, his gaze no longer avoiding but filled with confusion and regret. She set the phone down, looked again at the divorce papers in front of her, then gently pushed them back to the center of the table. No longer trembling, no longer hesitating, and for the first time, she was no longer the one being forced to choose, but the one holding the decision. And in that very moment, the entire balance in the room shifted. No longer them above and her below, but a reversal no one had been prepared for. Sign it. Don't let that pregnancy make you think you have the right to stay in this house. The door closed softly, but it was the final boundary. She walked away without looking back, without hesitation, without stopping even once. Behind her, no one called her name. No one ran after her. Not a single, "Stay!" And that silence was the clearest answer of all. Inside the house, everything remained the same, but the atmosphere had completely changed. No more laughter, no more mocking words, only a heavy emptiness that even they could not name. Her mother-in-law sat staring at the divorce papers, for the first time saying nothing. The words like, "You are not worthy," began echoing back in her mind in a way she could not push away. Her sister-in-law was silent, no more contempt in her eyes, because the words, "You don't need to stay," now carried more weight than any explanation. And her husband stood there for a long time, as if he had not yet understood what he had just lost. Then he stepped outside, but the road in front of the house was empty. She was gone. No message left, no second chance given. Only a void he had never imagined he would face. In the days that followed, he began to send messages. At first, "Did you get home? Can we talk?" Then, "I'm sorry. I know I was wrong. Give me another chance." But all of them fell into silence, not blocked, not rejected, just no reply. And that silence made him understand that this time it was not anger anymore. Some nights he sat for a long time in front of the screen, typing and deleting, wanting to call but not daring to, because in his mind there was only one sentence from her. "When I needed you to speak, you stayed silent." A short sentence, but enough to take away his right to say anything more. And as for her, in another place, no longer in that house, no longer under those judging eyes, she began her life again. No explanations, no proving, no need to be understood. Simply living the way she had always wanted but never had the chance to. And there was one thing they all understood too late. It wasn't that they lost her. It was that they themselves had pushed away the only person who had ever stayed, the only person who had been silent long enough before choosing to leave forever. Thank you for watching until the end. If this story made you think, don't forget to subscribe so you won't miss the next part. And tell me, would you stay or walk away?